Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to the Energize Your Online Business podcast. Hello, friends.
Hello, hello.
Hello.
Hello. As always, I am joined by my fabulous co-host, Kate Sitars. Hello, Kate.
Hello, hello.
Hello. And today we have the pleasure of being joined by Jessica Lackey. Hello, Jessica.
Hello.
Hello. We're super excited to have you. And I will go ahead and read your intro so you don't have to give us the full, so I'm sure you have yours memorized, but let me read it for you. Let me do this for you. Jessica Lackey is a strategy and operations advisor who bridges the gap between traditional business practices and a thirst for creating sustainable businesses with a human-centric approach. With a background in blue-chip corporate leadership, McKinsey & Company consulting, and a Harvard business degree, no slouch there, Jessica knows exactly what it's like to be forced into hustle culture and pigeonholed into judging success by the bottom line. I feel that. Now, Jessica combines her deep experience in consulting, Fortune 500 operations leadership, and coaching to help businesses grow without sacrificing the well-being of their clients, team, and community. Oh, yes. Yeah. This is going to be a good one, everybody. Hello, Jessica. Thank you for joining us.
We're so
excited to be here.
Yes, we are excited to have you. We, for a little bit of context for those listening or watching, we had the opportunity to chat with Jessica for a podcast on one of our other brands. And as we got into talking, we thought, oh my gosh, this brain is so good. We want to make sure that people on the Energize Your Online Business podcast get to sample her genius as well. So thank you for being back here.
It's an amazing conversation we had the last time. I don't expect today to be any different.
Yes, I'm super excited to dig in.
The bar is high, but I think we're going to exceed it. I have no doubts.
Exactly. So let's talk business. There's so many different angles that we could start with, and I'm sure this is going to take us in a lot of different directions. But I think maybe the first approach to take is talking about scaling a business. I don't know a business owner who isn't in some way, shape, or form thinking about growing, scaling, all of those kinds of things. What are some of the most fundamental mistakes that you see people making as they're thinking about scaling their business?
Yes, I think there's two really fundamental mistakes I see. And one is we conflate growth with scale. And I'll talk about what I mean there. And I think the second one is we don't recognize that scaling our business fundamentally changes our business model. And it changes the role you play as the business owner. And so in pursuit of scale, we can sometimes end up with a business that we are not sure we really wanted and not sure if it's as profitable as we want, or, it's the trap of, I'm going to scale a business so that I don't have to work in the business, but then I've created an entirely different type of business. So those are the two fundamental mistakes I see when we talk about scale.
Absolutely. So what is that difference between growth and scale?
So for me, I think growth and scale. Grow is how do we grow the top line while also growing the bottom line? So when we think about, if you are delivering a service, you are maybe raising price. I don't call that scale. I call that growth. You are adding more clients to your roster. Again, I don't call that scale. I call that growth because it's not really leveraged. Scaling is when we start to talk about creating more leverage in our business. So we do add some cost to our bottom line potentially, but our revenue more than outstrips it because we're thinking about a leveraged delivery model. This could be with a team where no longer is your time coupled with your revenue because you've got a team delivering services on your behalf, or you invest in courses and digital products so that, again, your time is less decoupled with your revenue. So that's where we think about scale is how do you can, with ads, with organic social media, you can grow your revenue, but you don't necessarily have to grow your costs at the same rate. And that's where we think about scale. It's really adding leverage to your business.
Yeah. And I definitely agree that most people are confusing those things. I certainly have confused those two things in my business experience.
I'm curious in terms of how do you know what you don't know type of thing? So if someone's like, I want to scale my business, that's what I do. That's what we're supposed to do. How do they navigate? How do you help them navigate, or how can people start to think through this question of, do I want to grow? Do I want to scale? Do I want to do both?
Yeah.
if it's going to fundamentally shift their business, and then it's like, ooh, this is not the business I wanted. How do you kind of test the waters, I guess?
Well, I think it's really important that we talk about what I call business models and business archetypes. So I've got 2 classes. There's technically 3 in my view, but for service-based business owners or knowledge-based workers, I have 2 different classes of business. I have delivery-based businesses where you're delivering a service. You are a coach, you are a copywriter, you are a graphic designer, and then there are creator-based businesses where you are running a community, you're running a group training program, you're running a digital products company, or you are selling, edutainment, as it were. You're a keynote speaker, monetizing through ads, or you're monetizing through sponsorships, or selling digital products. And within that delivery archetype, there are 3. There's what I call the craftsman, which is you are the copywriter. There's the consultant, which is, or the advisor, where you are advising on the copywriting and marketing strategy. And then there's the agency, where you are running a team of copywriters. And even within the agency, there's levels and grades of, okay, you're still doing some of the copywriting, you're still doing some of the strategy, you are still managing client relationships, or you truly have a managed team where you are the face of the brand and you are the rainmaker, and you don't really deal with client deliverables anymore. When you know those types of business models, then you can start to say, well, what are the qualities of that business? So, if you got into this business to be a copywriter, for example, yet you find yourself running a copywriting agency because you've been told that scale, that means you're doing less writing and less client work and a lot of team leadership and a lot of HR and financial planning.
Mm-hmm.
So I think making it transparent as you quote unquote scale, it changes the role you play in the business. Mm-hmm. It changes the responsibilities that you have to teams. We were talking on the pre-podcast about dog and pet ownership, right? You're like, oh, I can't take a random weekend away because my dog relies on me. That's actually the same when you think about scaling a business. If you take some time off and you don't have a reliable marketing pipeline and a system, you have team members that rely on you for direction, that rely on you to bring in new business. That adds a level of responsibility you don't necessarily have as a soloist. Yeah. So I think the first part of Kate, you're going back to your original question of how do we know what the right move is? The first part is knowing what the roles in business are and what the archetypes are, and then understanding the positives, but also the trade-offs that come with that.
And then on that creator side, the ones who, which I absolutely, I guess technically kind of fell into both those, but I started a course and I'm selling my course. And I think that for so many of us, we think that growing from, I sold a course and now that it's turn all the dials at once, hire all the people, do all the advertising, be on, all of that kind of thing. Where does that growth, or what can that growth pattern look like?
Yeah. I mean, there's the positive side, which is you start to do more organic social, you start to fill more of your programs. As you grow bigger, you might be spending 50% of your cost on advertising. You're running a content team. So you're no longer like a course creator, you're running a content team. You potentially are running an ads team. The big business owners, one of my colleagues who runs a productivity membership program with a course that goes along with that, they're a $2 million top line revenue, and they spend 50% of their dollars on ads. And so someone's job in the business is creating ads, running ads, monitoring the performance of the ads. And there's an entire small team of content creators that are feeding the YouTubes, the podcasts, the Instagram and Meta ads. That's when you get to that kind of big scale. There are other smaller course creators that have a course as part of a services portfolio. So they're not having to spend quite as much time and attention on the course is a part of the portfolio versus being the end all be all of what they're selling. And so there's the diversification. I'm still doing services. I'm still running some groups. And I also have a course that serves as maybe a lead in to those higher price programs. So it's really about the diversification and how much is the course going to be a percentage of your revenue versus it being the lead in product to like higher price services on the back end.
But generally, do you find that diversification is a better way to go, or focusing on that course or that program or whatever?
I think it depends on, again, your maturity in business. I don't advise diversifying until one of them is stable and you have a reason to add the other one. So let's say you have a course that's selling well and you are getting people in the door and it's profitable. You might at that point decide then, okay, that is can a cash fund the community that's on the back end of that course. But that also requires, usually when you diversify models, you have to have a large enough client population and a pool to make it worthwhile. Because if you're struggling to, you get people in the course, but they don't finish, and you have a fairly high churn rate on like coursing program participation, or you're not selling your services as seamlessly as you would like, adding yet another business model on is a fracturing of time, attention, and every business model comes with new costs. So I always advise be stable in one before you add another and make sure it has a purpose in the client journey. We do not at all want to cannibalize. If you're selling a course, but then you offer a VIP day that does the same thing and they're priced where they're going to cannibalize each other, or it's priced at the same demo, or your list isn't large enough yet to support both services, you're trading one for the other. So how do we make sure that we add those business models on in sequence when one is stable enough to support the investments in the other?
This was actually a question that you suggested, and I really, really like this one. How do financial and energetic metrics shift at each stage of that scale?
Yeah. So when you're smaller, we want to make sure that you have sustainable revenue for you. And that is very dependent on your personal situation. What is your personal needs? What are you using this business for? And, again, crafting your life around your business, around your life. I say that if you want to work 4 days a week, what does that mean for the business you need to create? And how does that then support and fund your life? As we start to scale, there's interestingly this messy middle part where right on the precipice. And then for the first few months, there's I'm actually going to make less money probably and spend more time because I am building the infrastructure to scale. And I am hiring said person who's not going to be super productive yet. And I'm essentially using money to buy back my time so that I can then invest it for those higher leverage revenue activities that I'm going to do. Really funny though, you find that that when you go from doing the work to managing others doing the work, it's a complete energetic shift because what you've been rewarded for in the past is hands-on keyboard doing client work, being uber responsive and having your hands on all the client work and having your hands on all the things and knowing all the intimate details, right? That's what got you to where you are going. When you start to move up from a scale perspective, your job shifts to being more strategic, to having less things on the calendar that are task lists and having more time for dreaming and having more time for strategy and more time for visioning. That is scary as hell for so many people who have been probably trapped on the hamster wheel of task and content and doing all the things to really take a step back and say, oh, wait, that's not my job anymore. My job is to train my team members, set clear expectations, set performance guidelines, and then be thinking about bigger things. And that's more self-directed versus client and deliverable, from your business. You are the less of the recipient of the to-dos from your inbox and more of a total shepherd of that strategy. And that's some people are like, wait, they wanted to have a job. They didn't know it, but they wanted to have a job where, you're just getting task list. And now they're like, oh, now I have to be the leader. I have to have the vision beyond just make a sustainable revenue. It's a whole energetic shift. It requires different conversations, different content, different peer group. And not everyone, when they get there, they're like, I don't want this. Some people say that. Some people are like, I don't really want to have, I kind of just want to take client work and do, I want to run the courses and I want to do client work. And I don't really want the responsibilities that come with being the visionary in a business.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because I had a similar experience this past year, except kind of the opposite. There were a lot of fantastic things that happened last year, and super, super pleased with the year as a whole. But one of the things that I struggled with is that I noticed that I had built myself a desk job. And I thrive in having more freedom to the day, having fewer discrete tasks in the day, and more time to kind of play and to vision and to strategize. And I noticed that it snuck up on me, and we have a fantastic team. So it's not that I haven't been delegating things, certainly, although Kate, now would be the time to mention it. Actually, Nicki, but I found that I had inadvertently built myself a desk job, which was not what I got into business for. Do you see that as well? And what are some of the markers or the red flags as people are heading down that road?
Yeah, I do see that. It's like they've inadvertently built a desk job when they wanted a visionary open space. And I see, again, the flip side is some people don't know what to do with the open space of a visionary.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's when you have the desk job, this is when you kind of, use the visionary time you have created to take that step back and again, kind of look process at process. Why are these tasks lining up on your plate? A lot of times things end up on our plate from a desk job perspective because they're in the seed stage. Even if you've got a business that scales,
mm-hmm.
like this particular element is at a seed stage. And so you're doing things because it's too nascent to delegate.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really classifying those tasks that land on your desk and the meetings that land on your desk and saying, is this supposed to be here because I'm coming up with new seeds and sprouts and I'm tending those before I hand them over? Or is there something underlying in our systems that is meaning that this ends up on my desk because it's been that maybe the task has been delegated, but you're still retaining the emotional labor and the mental load of that task. And so again, how are you looking and classifying oh yes, this is an existing process where it shouldn't be on my plate. This is a nascent process where I'm the incubator and it's not ready yet to be delegated.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That makes sense. I think as a lot of people start looking at their workload and they go, this is something I'm good at. I should keep doing this, but this is something I'm not good at or something I don't understand. I think one of the first things that we think about is, all right, I'm going to hire somebody. I'm going to outsource. Maybe I'll hire an agency. What are some considerations as people start thinking about, I'm just going to outsource it. I'm going to give it to somebody else.
Yeah. One, if you're outsourcing something you don't understand, that's a recipe for getting taken advantage of, getting scammed, having it go wrong in your business. I see this a lot with financials. Okay, we're going to outsource our bookkeeping. Outsource your bookkeeping. Everyone should outsource their bookkeeping. Yeah. But what you can't do is outsource the financial analysis that comes from your books. Mm-hmm. So this is when, you think, okay, I'm going to have a bookkeeper, but how am I also going to take a financial course to understand how to read the reports they're sending me and to look for weird things? So one, do you understand it? And if not, that's something that actually you need a foundational understanding before you outsource, because otherwise you don't know what to expect. You don't know you can't quality check the deliverables and see what you're getting. Mm-hmm. And the other one is when you're looking to outsource something, if you outsource it to a generalist, you have to come up with the process. You have to manage them. If you outsource it to a specialist or expert, they have a process to manage you. And so if you're outsourcing again, a lot of people want to outsource everything to a VA. And that's one of the things that drives me crazy, because you're going to have to set those processes and standards for that virtual assistant. So you actually, from I don't want to say hierarchy level perspective, but you're operating at a high level, they're operating at a doer level. And it's almost your responsibility to drop down to the doer level and codify things to a level that is what is kind of manageable by that level. Mm-hmm. If you hire an expert to say, I'm going to hire a process consultant, I'm going to hire a systems expert who will come in and almost rise up and grab out of my head, because they have a system and they know what to be looking for. They can grab out of your head and create first drafts. They can create process docs that then you react to versus having to be the one that like slows down and creates all the SOPs and things like that. So I think that's too, like, is this something that you want to set the parameters, you want to do the management, or is this something where you're like, well, I'm actually going to hire an expert to set some of these things up, because then I don't have to do quite as much managing because they are going to manage me versus me having to manage them.
It's interesting as we talk about this, because one of the things that I have found challenging in the past is asking the right questions for a job that I know effectively what I want, but I don't know how that person's brain works, if that makes sense. An example would be operations. Now, thankfully, we have found a phenomenal operations manager. Caitlin is spectacular. But before I hired Caitlin, I hired another operations manager who was a very nice person, but didn't have the skills and abilities. And I think that there were a couple of different problems as I was going to hire that person. Is number one, I didn't really understand the questions to ask to get at the way someone's brain works. And maybe I didn't even understand the role. But as you're looking for someone to hire someone in a role where I guess you kind of don't even really necessarily understand how they operate, how do you dig into that to make sure that you are asking the right questions to get the right person in the door? Does that make sense?
It does. I think it's less about the right questions and more about, which is part of it, but I think it's more about establishing the level that they need to be operating at. So level one is an executor. I tell you what to do, you execute it, kind of without question. So there's that one. There's the analyst level, which is I'm going to tell you what to execute, but there's some critical thinking involved in like, oh, well, I'm going to look at the outputs of this and then judge whether or not actually I'm getting the results I'm looking for. Then you start to move into the manager. I can manage a process, and I can like look for opportunities. You have the builder. I can build new things. And then you have like that designer and strategist where I'm going to look upstream of the process and design new things to implement. And then the strategist is I'm going to completely look at not even like new things in the current process, but like whole new opportunities. And I think we tend to we think we want executor level, but actually what we really need is builder and designer level. And that's where, if you're looking for someone who's on time, on task, but you really need someone that is proactively going to be looking for opportunities and like coming almost again, proactively managing you versus you managing them. It's a whole different like organizational level with a different title and pay scale usually. And so when you say, okay, well, what do I need? Just as I need to hire someone, like how organizationally ready are you and what level do you need? And then you start to ask questions like, tell me about a time where you saw a process that wasn't working well. How did you handle it? Because again, if you're looking for someone that's just going to execute SOPs that are already written and rock solid bulletproof, that's a different question of how do you manage multiple things on your plate? How do you error check your results versus someone that's that more builder level to say, tell me about a time you found an opportunity. How would you manage multiple priorities? When you had too many things on your plate, how would you know what the most important one was? Those are but you first start with knowing the level that you're really hiring at, not the level that you eventually want them to be at. Because I see this a lot with like social media. I just want someone to like make social media for me. Turns out that what you really needed is a marketing strategist and a messaging coach and a graphic design wizard, because you're not ready for execution. You're still in development stage. And so we don't ask, that's where it's like, well, are you ready to even hire that execution role? Or do you really still need to be in like the vision strategy portion so that when you get the execution role, you've got brand voice, you've got the right graphic templates, your content strategy and like what should go out versus just spending money on execution tasks.
Oh, I love that. I think that's so insightful. I think what so many business owners do is we go, I have a problem. I'm going to hire someone without actually stepping back and thinking, okay, yes, I need a person, but what specifically, getting to that level of detail and true need, and not, well, I'll hire someone and then, like you said, hire someone and then they'll grow and then they'll do this. I'm just really, really enjoying that insight.
I think it's the reverse. I would say before you hire a retainer-based employee or contractor or someone that's going to perform on long term, actually, I would hire a short-term expert to make sure you are set up for success and you are building the infrastructure for that person to come into. Because if you've been doing it for as long as you've been doing it, and you're like, well, I'm going to hire someone to do it for me, that translation step is nearly impossible. I mean, it's not only impossible. If you are willing and committed to like download from your brain, and I don't know anyone that can really do this for themselves, right? Like cobbler's kids have no shoes. We can't see the inside of the jar from where we are. Like for you to take your innate gifts, especially if it's something that you were gifted at. Like, again, if it's like zone of incompetence, things like that, like, you're like, well, there's nothing I wasn't doing it in the first place. So I don't really have systems. Like that's different. But if you were like, this has been my voice, my brand, this has been my service, to have someone, you try to delegate that to someone, you're having to explain your genius to someone that's not their role. But if you are hiring an expert to help be like, I'm going to help pull your genius out of you, codify it, document it, get you to sign off on it, create processes for someone else to do, that's a short-term, higher price investment that's finite in a project. And then they hand that off to someone who can then execute based on your parameters.
Mm-hmm. I love that everything that you're so good at diagnosing real issues, obviously, clearly. But I know you also have talked about, the short-term fixes. And I feel like that's a result. People are moving so fast that they just, okay, here's the short-term fix. And I don't even know if we realize that it's a short-term fix versus what we really need. So do you have any advice or ways how do you slow down in some ways to actually notice, oh, this is a short-term fix. This isn't the real problem. How do you even get to that realization that you're not solving the real issue? Yeah,
I think part of it is like almost like you have to force yourself to slow down, which is why hiring the right coach is always a fantastic way, because they will force your butt to sit down and think about it. So the 5 whys is a process to look at the symptom. Like, okay, like this is happening. You ask questions about, well, why is this happening? Why would that be happening? Like, let's take social media as an example. Oh my God, I'm not consistent in my marketing. Okay, well, why am I not consistent in my marketing? Oh, well, I don't know what to ever say, right? You ask the second question. Why don't you ever know what to say? Oh, I don't really love my offers. Or my brand kit looks so drab, or I don't know what to put on Instagram. Like you ask those, you keep going down and you're like, I don't know who I'm trying to target and what I'm trying to solve for them. Like if that's really like the root cause, then we don't need more marketing. We need positioning support, and we need to diagnose what's happening with our messaging and who our client base are, and like what's the value proposition for our offers. If we were to hire a social media person to quote unquote make more marketing, we're solving a symptom that's actually going to cost you money and not get you results, versus going all the way down to the root. That same, I don't want to be posting on social media, or I'm not posting enough on social media, may actually be like the problem may be actually the way I like to write is no longer, or the way I like to show up is no longer matching with this platform. So instead of it being a positioning problem, it might be I need to change my platform. I need to add something new to the marketing stack versus quote unquote doing more marketing. I need to maybe, Instagram for me, the past year or two, like I'm a writer at heart. I'm a long form video girl at heart. My newsletters are like 2,000 words, like a week. It's crazy. And that doesn't translate to 90-second or like 7-second and, funny clips. Like I'm not funny. I wish I was funny, but I'm not funny. And Instagram right now for me, like rewards funny. So trying to be quote unquote more on Instagram is like a missing cause, because that's not how I want to show up. And it's actually not where my people are. So I'm investing in YouTube, and I'm investing in more writing and podcast guesting, where I get to, and I do a lot of teaching. And I think that's where it's really important to say, like, is the problem I need to show up more on Instagram and go harder on that? For me, it wasn't. For me, it was, this is just not the platform for me right now. I need to change platforms. Very different diagnosis.
Yeah. So I know you talk about human-centered practices. Can you share a bit more about what that means and why it's so important and the impact it can have?
Of course. So when I say human-centered practices, I think we are not machines. And so when we think about constant growth, productivity that's industrialized, as it were, that is not how we as humans work. And so part of you asked the question, like, is there any person out there that doesn't want to scale? And I'm like, right now, I do not want to scale. I am in the pre-scale part of my business because I know that I have been working very diligently over the past couple of years since I started my business, and I'm at a stasis point. I'm in an integration point, and I'm in the stage of like, all right, I'm deepening my roots, but not necessarily expecting to grow my revenue substantially this year because I'm preparing for the next jump. When we're talking about, and that's foreign in like our productivity centric culture, right? Like a recession is when year over year GDP doesn't grow. And I'm like, okay, so stability is a problem, and integration is a problem, and having ebbs and flows, like I'm going to have seasons of growth and seasons of rest. Like that's not rewarded in our traditional, particularly corporate cycle. Like, you've got to grow, you got to have earnings targets. The human centeredness is like plants don't grow consistently. Like it's they sometimes have root down seasons. Sometimes it's like stuff working under the surface. They are not constantly in bloom. Like there is summer, but like recognizing that like actually new year, new you energy is, yes, Gregorian calendar says January starts, but like a lot of people tend to start around Imbolc, tend to start around the spring equinox because energetically it's starting to get lighter. It's starting to get warm. And so I think pretending that we can operate like machines, that we need to be scheduled, that we need to quote unquote buy back all our time. There's a book that's called that. And it drives me batty because he was talking about how he like set up his schedule so that he worked from like 9 to 12 or 9 to 1 without a break. And I'm like, give me my breaks. Give me breaks. Like, yes, that 15 minutes of like quote unquote unproductive time. I need that time. It's when I take my dog for a walk. It's when I go to the bathroom. It's when I have like my water. It's also when I need to be human with someone on a phone call, and maybe it lasts a little over than the time allotment. And I think the practices we see in corporate business, the linear, always up, up and to the right, constant, relentless growth, that's the only thing that grows. The only thing that grows unchecked is cancer. Like, let's just say that out loud.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love that insight because there is definitely if you're not growing consistently, you're doing something wrong. And I think you're completely right that these linear, very delineated processes are fed to us as, okay, that's how you get like you need the hour in the morning when you do, and it has to be from 5 to 6, and you have to meditate and you have to journal and you have to do this. And then from that, and I have found that I really rebel against having a set schedule like that. And it's a good opportunity, now that it's a good opportunity to beat myself up and I know a lot of other business owners who do the same thing. Like, well, I'm supposed to be doing the miracle morning or whatever it is. And either we don't, as a person, we don't respond well to that, or our lives don't respond well to that. And then it feels like, that's a reason why we're not seeing the success that we want to see.
Yeah. When I was working in corporate, I would show up to work. I'm not a morning person, and I would show up to work at 8:30 and 9, and they would look at me side-eyed. They're like, "You're not on time." And I'm like, "I'm staying here till 7:00. Leave me alone."
Mm-hmm.
So I would quote unquote work from 8:39 to 5. And when I say work, I was in meetings all damn day. And then I would do my actual job from like 5 to 7 before I go home. And, when I like leapt out into entrepreneurship, I'm like, why am I tired at 3:00 every day? Oh, it's because when I was in corporate, half of my work time was sitting in meetings that I didn't need to be in and browsing the internet and going on coffee chats and like kind of like wandering around, but it didn't require me. Like, I mean, I had to be there. I had to show up. When you're doing entrepreneurship, you can't phone in client calls. I mean, you can, but that's bad practice. You can't phone in deep work. Like I can't phone in this conversation. I can't just like be like, oh, we're going to be here and I'm going to like scroll on Instagram. You have to like show up, and it requires you. And I can't do more than 3 to 4 hours of deep work a day. Yeah, I can like process emails at the end of the day, but I run out of steam of really creative time. And this whole 8-hour workday, 40-hour work week, if you're doing truly creative work, truly deep work, like you're probably doing deep, like able to do deep work for 25 to 30% of that. And then you're cooked. And then it's like, all right, how do we then structure our days with admin rounding into those business practices? I was judging myself when I started. I'm like, why am I so tired? I used to be able to pull 12 to 14-hour days when I was in corporate. It's an entirely different level of work. And that means I take more vacations. It means I give myself much more buffer time, because when I was in my old job, when I come back, you know, when you take a week-long vacation and then you need a vacation from your vacation. When I was in corporate, I would just show up to Monday. I would show up sad and I would phone it in for all my meetings, and I would be there in spirit, you know, badge in. But I would just process my emails and get caught up most of the day, right? And show up what I had to show up. I can't do that with my clients. Like that would be a disservice to them. And so I actually block like the day before and the day after for my time so that I show up well. But that requires, again, like, you know, that's a human-centered practice. Like, oh, I'm not working on a Monday. I'm like, well, I need to go to the grocery store. Like, I'm going to go do that.
But also that rest is productive. I think that was the biggest mindset shift that I recently made of I don't need to feel guilty about taking a pause and taking time off and resting, because that is productive.
Yeah. I think if we're not goal setting, we feel like we're making a mistake, or we feel like we're letting ourselves and our businesses down. And I agree. I have found a lot of antipathy to the concept of goals actually lately, that they have been limiting me more than anything else. How do you feel about goals, and how do you help your clients plan for the future if goals aren't what you recommend?
So I always like to say, what's the vision? Like, what's our lighthouse? Where are we headed? And then I don't care about the number. I actually don't. I only care about the number as it signals magnitude of change and direction. So if we're going from having 5 clients to wanting to double the client roster, what does that mean from an activity basis? What do we have to do? And then what are the projects that we have to do in order to make those activities easier? And then it's about executing those activities at the speed and pace that we're looking for. So again, I think I talked to you about like quitting Instagram and moving to YouTube. I've been working on that for 6 months. Every month was some chunk of that process. And I don't know what's going to happen. I really don't. So it's like, I don't know what's going to happen, but I know the activities in my business that I want to put in place. And I'm releasing the expectation of what that's going to do, what the goal is. I'm like, but like, this is the project I'm excited to work on. This is someone I read recently talked about the learning objective. And so instead of having an outcome-based goal, how do we have our learning objective? Which is, what am I interested in learning right now? What questions do I have about my work? And how do I go answer them? And turn that into maybe client projects or business projects. And I'm mostly concerned with like, how are we planting seeds, tending sprouts, and strengthening roots? We got to keep an eye on the results, because we do want to know if we're moving closer to our goals, our vision, as it were. But like right now, one of my clients, like she has kind of goals, but really she's at the process of she's planted everything she needs to plant, and now she's tending, and she's not doing a whole lot of new planting, because she spent the last year launching new things, restructuring her offers, raising her prices, networking, and now she's in maintenance mode a little bit to see how those things are doing. It's working, it's getting her more revenue, and she feels much better about it. But she's actually like, what am I supposed to do? I'm like, you're just supposed to keep doing what you're doing and let the results catch up to your effort. Mm-hmm. She's not in a season of doing new things. She's in a season of letting all the work she's been doing consistently catch up. Mm-hmm. I think the biggest takeaway that I want people to have is that, and I know this sounds like a privileged statement if you're not making sustainable revenue, but to slow down because, trying to water 15 plants at once and trying to grow 15 plants at once is going to leave all of them shriveled and sad. But going to the root and picking one or two projects I'm going to work on, scale might be the goal, right? And it's like, how do I scale? I think, again, we go back to there are many decisions to be made during that course of scale. And how do we not focus on scaling as the outcome, but really distilling it down into saying, what do I need to prepare myself for scale? How do I scale? And then almost recognizing, well, no one wants to hear it. That is probably a much longer journey than we think. But instead of trying to jam it all into a single month or a single quarter and doing it badly, this journey might take 2 to 3 years. And it's all about root by root, seed by seed. It's about taking these big ideas and chunking it down to solving, the first root layer of making sure your model is set, your messaging is set, you feel confident in showing up, and then adding more layers, adding hiring as you go. I think we are conditioned for speed and quick results because of the environment we come from, where fast growth is celebrated and slow and steady growth is, I don't want to say something to be ashamed of, but something that's, these overnight successes, it took them 7 years and then they became an overnight success. It's like, how did I make 50K in a month? Well, I built an audience for 6 years and then I sold them something, right? I think more celebration of the making slow and steady progress on activity building, recognizing that the results might not be linear to the effort at the get-go. And then on the other side, once you do get the skills, the results are also not linear to the effort because it's that transition curve.
So good. Jessica, I know for a fact that people listening are like, how can I get more of her? So where can they find you? How can they follow you? How can they work with you? Give us all of the details, please.
Yes. So they can find all those things at jessicalackey.com/welcome. So I have a quiz, which is what stage of your business cycle are you in? Shockingly, it's tree centered. I have a newsletter that goes out every week. I also teach a free business class. This is not a sales pitch. It's a free business class once a month because I'm all about democratizing access to business education. And they can find all that on the newsletter.
Fantastic. Excellent. Well, Jessica, thank you so much. I will echo what Kate said. We are going to have you back as many times as we possibly can.
We're so lucky for your time. We're very
so lucky.
Appreciative and lucky. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And with that, we will catch you all in the next episode. Bye, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Do you want to learn how to sell and scale your offer on autopilot every single day without the chaos of live launching or the low conversions of Evergreen? Who doesn't, right? Get our free on-demand video training at circuitsalessystem.com/free. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to this channel to make sure you never miss a video. We'll catch you next time.